Welcome back to the Lenders Online Training Podcast and to our CRE Commercial Real Estate Series. I'm Joe Davis, Senior Credit Trainer with LOT, and I'm joined today by someone I've really been looking forward to introducing you to, Gina Marotta. Gina has spent her career in commercial real estate from loan securitization back in the mid-90s all the way through the FDIC closure era, kind of during and coming out of the Great Recession, where Gina sat on contract teams working all commercial real estate book as community banks were being wound down. Gina, most of the people watching have never worked a real CRE downturn. You certainly have. Welcome.
Thanks, Joe. Glad to be here. I met Linda with Lenders Online Training back in 2008, 2009, when she was doing tax return analysis for CRE lending. At that time, I turned from doing structured finance, CMBS, CLO loans to working with credit unions and community banks, balance sheet lenders. And I formed CU CRE Advisors, which provides participation underwriting, annual loan reviews, and providing services as a third-party credit officer for institutions that are in need of an experienced set of eyes on a file before they fund the loan.
That's great. And that's exactly why this conversation matters. We have a whole generation of lenders who have structured deals for 15 plus years in a market that mostly went one direction, right? They've never seen it kind of go the other way as you and I have in our career. So Gina, when you and I first talked, something you said really stuck with me. You said the next downturn will not look like the last one. Walk us through that.
Yeah, it's dynamic. Obviously, we're in a different interest rate environment, but it's really about looking at the real estate and the operational needs of the real estate. The good news is we're not seeing a lot of 100+% LTVs, but as the listeners will learn through this conversation, LTVs, it's really not only looking about the expense side in determining value, but also the capital expense side of the balance sheet, which is money needed to fund equipment replacements, property upgrades, unit turns. And appraisers don't always include that in their valuation conclusion. And it's necessary because it is a requirement of property ownership that's getting missed, and thus getting missed in the valuation for the concluded LTV.
That's really interesting. And, I've certainly preached really extensive appraisal reviews for banks and credit unions. Don't just flip to that second or third page, see the value and call it good. You really have to look at that because, to your point, those are a bit of art and science, and they can miss things like replacement reserves, maintenance expense, replacement of equipment, that sort of thing. And that is the piece I really want lenders and credit analysts to hear. The loan can look clean. The property can look fine, and the deal can still be in trouble because nobody planned for the capital needs that were always coming. So I've always been harping on replacement reserves my whole career and gotten pushback very frequently. And this is exactly why it's important, right, Gina?
Yeah, that's right. I'm seeing loans, balance sheet loans, and particularly credit union loans, where they're not doing a property condition report or property needs assessment. And this is crucial, particularly for loans that are for collateral properties that are 30 plus years in age. And the reports run from anywhere, a good report, a thorough report, from $2,500 to $3,000. And it's a very prudent due diligence expense, not only for the lender, but for the owner of the property to really understand what's going on with the real estate behind the walls, and from a component operational perspective. And as lenders know, an expense like that is something that the borrower pays. So it's not something that becomes a lender expense, but it is something that's paid by the borrower. It is a report that can be provided to the borrower once the loan closes. So it's a real value add for the transaction to understand the physical condition of the property. And then to complement that, again, talking about balance sheet instead of, the property profit and loss statement, is for the lender to understand, does the borrower have the cash reserves to meet the replacement and renovation needs that are forecasted for the property in that report? And if they don't, that's okay. It's a matter of the lender then structuring that in the loan to capture those cash needs through the property cash flow during the loan term.
Yeah, and what you're talking about is, you don't need a new parking lot or a new roof every single year. But those things don't last forever, and they will eventually need to be either a major repair or replacement. You have to make sure the cash is going to be available, either from the ongoing operations and saving up, or liquidity, right? And that's another thing I wanted to ask you to touch on, Gina, because you're a big proponent of really underwriting and vetting the operator too, right? Not just the asset.
Yeah, that's right. Understanding the experience of your operator, not just the experience from a real estate investment perspective, but with that property type in that market. And if they don't have the experience, have they reached out and engaged a third-party management company? Third-party management companies do add value to property operations. So it's about, are they experienced with that property type in that market? If not, have they engaged a third-party operator? And moreover, Joe, I think it goes to the fact is there are operators that can run an asset, but that doesn't mean they can run a capital projects for that asset. So understanding what is their process, what are their ownership routines for actually going out to bid for a new HVAC system or new boiler. Do they have a policy and procedure in place? And how are they overseeing? Do they have an engineer, a facilities engineer, or someone that they have that can assist them from a technical expertise perspective to oversee the vendors that are actually doing the technical equipment replacement work or property renovation? You could have a unit or units in a multifamily property that has extensive mold damage, and you need to completely rehabilitate those units. That typically requires a little heavier experience than just a property manager to oversee those capital projects, making sure that the capital is being invested in the property in a prudent and sustainable manner.
That's a really good point. And when you're talking about that, it comes to mind. I think our industry does a disservice when we call something passive income. When you own real estate, it's not set it and forget it. You need to actively work on that, actively stay engaged and on top of that. Because if not, the property won't last forever. And to your point, catching those things early, working your way properly through the projects really saves a lot of time, a lot of money, and a lot of headache on the back end. We as lenders care about that because, of course, that's our collateral and our source of repayment.
Yeah, that's right. I like the way you emphasize the back end, because it's really about how you're getting paid during your loan term. Is there sufficient cash flow? Is it sustainable? You got to make investments to sustain that cash flow. But then moreover, your exit. How are you getting paid off when your loan matures? And if you have property conditions and property servability issues, it impairs your ability to get paid off at exit.
Yeah, great point. And Gina, there's one more thing you raised that I don't think gets enough attention, and I want to tee it up for the audience. So when you say collateral, you don't just mean the real estate, right?
Yeah, that's right. When we look at the investment that the lender is actually entering into, it's a loan asset. That loan asset obviously is secured by collateral. We want to make sure we've got durability and sustainability of our collateral, but our asset is really the loan documents. Because if we have to exercise our right as a secured creditor, we need to exercise those rights under the governance of those legal documents. And those legal documents have to be clear on what the lender's rights are, what the borrower's obligations are, and how the lender can execute upon their rights. So yes, the loan documents, and that ranges from the promissory note, which is your primary asset. The asset to the lender is the promissory note, the ability to get repaid back. For loans that have guarantees, then the secondary source of your asset is that guarantee. Again, it's about the money to get to be able to exercise your rights under the guarantee. And then I would say sort of pari passu to that is your deed of trust or your mortgage, which is security interest against the real estate should you have to foreclose. And then also understanding when you foreclose, are you foreclosing in a judicial state or a non-judicial state? That makes a difference. We can certainly talk more about that if folks sign up for our live stream. But then also the title policy, your UCC filings, if you have additional collateral for your loan, like bank accounts, you've got to keep up with your UCC filings because most UCCs expire after 3 or 5 years. It depends on the state. And then also making sure you have an assignment of leases and rents. I have seen lenders close on income producing real estate. They have their deed of trust, they have their mortgage, but they don't have an assignment of leases and rents. And if you sign up for the viewers or the listeners sign up for our live podcast, you can learn more about how you utilize that assignment of leases and rents when you are during a foreclosure process.
Yeah, great points. Doc issues, they're just such a killer. Any gray area in those documents gets held against the lender in court. The lender's responsible. They prepared the docs. They do it all day, every day. So this is really a hard lesson to learn at the worst possible moment.
It is, Joe, because if you take your note, your deed of trust, your guarantee before the court of law, and this assumes you're in a judicial foreclosure state, if there are any inconsistencies, it delays the process, and time is money. And delaying the process means that loan sits on your balance sheet as a non-accrued asset that you're reporting back to your regulators, and that's not something we want to have. So the legal documents and the investment that's made upfront at loan closing, which is paid by your borrower, is critical.
Yeah, for sure. And you mentioned assignment of rents and leases, and I'm going to just tease a little bit for our upcoming live sessions. I do want to ask you about SNDAs. They're kind of shrouded in mystery, and a lot of smaller organizations don't use them, but I think there's a time and a place, and I think they can be really beneficial.
Yeah, especially for owner-occupied real estate. Years back, I'd worked on a loan participation for a credit union. It was a really nice investment opportunity. It was a single tenant transaction, and I'd asked the originator, I was representing the participant in that loan, I'd asked the originator for the subordination of the lease, because there was a lease in place, and the response was, we had a title policy. Well, that doesn't help you. And in fact, the credit union that I was working with decided to not purchase the participation simply because the lender had not put a subordination agreement in place for that single tenant lease.
Yeah, really good points. So here's the deal. Gina and I could keep going on for hours and hours trading war stories. We're not going to do that today. We're going to offer 2 upcoming live sessions. And in those, Gina and I are going to take this further, and we want it built around your questions, not just what we think you want to hear, but what you actually want to hear and what's on your mind. So on August 18th and August 25th, we'll be hosting live sessions. We're going to cover the following. What a CRE downturn actually looks like on the ground from someone who worked the last one. Reading the capital side of a deal, those reserves we mentioned, deferred maintenance, and the costs that we as bankers certainly can underestimate from time to time. And then sizing up the operator, as Gina was talking about. So looking at property, but also who's operating it. And then the credit and collateral review most institutions skip until it's too late.
Yes, absolutely. That and to the listeners out there, it's always good to present us questions based on real cases that you're faced with, so that the responses and the information that we share with you can be utilized in your work. The best sessions I have done, and in cases where I've worked with clients, it's really driven by your real life experiences, not by a script that we develop.
Yeah, agree. So everybody, this is your invitation. So make note of the live sessions and come with those questions. Maybe a deal that doesn't quite feel right, or a property where the numbers work, but something's kind of nagging at you, maybe in the back of your mind, or a document or a title issue you're just not quite sure about, or really just a general question about CRE and about recessions. So feel free to attend either session or both of them. We'd love to have as many people as possible come and bring your ideas and your thoughts and your questions.
Yeah, absolutely. Bring your questions and scenarios, and they could be quantitative or qualitative, or they could be just understanding the vernacular of CRE lending. See, in real estate investment, lending has its own language. So if there are terms that you're tripped up on, don't always rely on AI on a Google search. That AI doesn't always understand the practical application of terminology for operational real estate. So bring all those questions to us. We look forward to hearing them and having a conversation around your needs as a real estate lender and real estate lending analyst.
Yeah, absolutely. Gina, thank you. This is really going to be a good one. Really looking forward to our sessions. So for everyone watching, stay grounded, stay curious, and we will really appreciate seeing you live here in a few weeks. Thank you.